Dennis Lynn Rader was born in 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. He was a student of Kansas Wesleyan University who went on to join the United States Air Force in 1966. To his neighbors and family, Dennis was known as a polite and warm guy. But the police force and his victims knew him as BTK Strangler, or the BTK Killer, a nickname he gave himself because he would first bind, then torture, and lastly kill his victims. Rader would often write letters where he elaborately described how he carried out his murders. He would also send letters to the police or television centers. His murders were planned well before execution, but he himself admitted that a lot of his potential victims were lucky enough to evade their unfortunate ends due to anomalies. Nevertheless, Rader was arrested on the 25th of February in 2005 and was charged with 10 counts of murder. Moving on to number 2 on our list of the most dangerous inmates is Aileen Wuornos, an American serial killer and sex worker. Wuornos had a troubling childhood. Her imprisoned father committed suicide, she was abandoned by her mother, and she was exposed to all kinds of abuse by her grandparents at a very young age. According to her, her grandfather would beat her and torture her, and even go as far as sexually assaulting her. She ended up getting pregnant at the age of 14 after being raped by an acquaintance of her grandfather. In order to support herself, Aileen found work as a sex worker. She went frequently in and out of jail for theft, drunk driving, forging checks. However, her most atrocious crime was the murder of 7 men at point-blank range. According to the perpetrator, all her murders were acts of self-defense. She was diagnosed with being bipolar at her sentencing. Aileen received 6 death sentences and was executed by a lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Perhaps her tumultuous childhood led her on a path of destruction, but Aileen was very well aware of the evil she was capable of, which led to her termination of all legal appeals. She was genuinely consumed with hate, but even in prison, she just wanted to be treated as a human. Perhaps Aileen would not have been a menace to society had society not been a menace to her. Our next inmate is Rodney Alcala, who was convicted for the rape and murder of several women from 1968 to 1979. He earned his nickname because of his appearance in a dating game show in the midst of his killing spree. Alcala went on to win the competition, but ultimately was rejected by the female lead because she found him too creepy. He was introduced as a professional photographer to the public, a ruse he would use to lure men and women. Most of his photos were sexually explicit, and the police released around 120 photos in an effort to identify some of the women. Peter Manuel was convicted for the murder of 7 people. He even went on to live in the house of the last family that he murdered. He fed the cat and ate their leftover food before taking their car and banknotes. He used the money he stole to pay for drinks, which would later lead to him being arrested by the police. At the trial, Manuel surprised the judges by firing his attorney and defending himself, a performance well praised by the judge, but not enough to prove him innocent. The weight of evidence against the weight of his defense was too heavy, and he was executed by hanging on July 11, 1958. He was hung on the gallows at Barlinnie Prison. Richard Lee McNair is an American criminal who had been convicted for murder, attempted murder, burglary, and escape. He is also quite well known as the man who mailed himself out of prison. McNair often used creative methods to escape from prison 3 times from 3 different institutions. The first time, he made use of a lip balm to slide his hands out of his handcuffs. The second time, he exited the facility by crawling through ventilation ducts. But his last attempt at fleeing prison earned him his nickname. He used a crate to mail himself out of jail, but he skillfully convinced another police officer that he was a citizen on a jog and not a prisoner just escaped. While out, McNair traveled to Canada twice and made his living through forged identity theft and a lot of hiding. However, he was caught and then sent to the ADX Florence, a prison with maximum security which houses some of the United States' most notorious criminals. Our next serial killer may have been Austrian, but the range of his crimes was quite global, as he was active in Austria, Czechoslovakia, West Germany, and the United States. Unterweger earned his nickname the Underwear Strangler, as all his victims were garroted to death by their underwear. Although he was convicted and jailed for his first murder, he was released on parole after serving 15 years in prison. He worked as a host for different shows, but sadly, old habits die hard, and he reverted back to his old ways of killing women. He was captured in Miami, Florida, but hung himself at Graz Carlo prison after receiving a life sentence without parole. The creepy clown Pennywise from the movie may be a work of fiction, however, a real Pennywise did exist. He went under the guise of a husband, a loving father, and an amiable colleague by the name John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was a bit of a loner child. He had a medical condition and he constantly sought the approval of his father, who would abuse him verbally and physically. On the exterior, Gacy was a good man, but he had a secret life that no one was aware of. He joined the Clown Club and made a character, Pogo the Clown. This, paired with his future killings, would give him the title of Killer Clown. He used to tempt men with lucrative offers and handcuff them after drugging them and kill them with tricks. Gacy was convicted for sodomy, sexual assault, and 33 counts of murder and sentenced to death. He was arrested on December 21, 1978, and the days following his arrest, police would uncover numerous bones of different victims buried under his dwelling. On May 9th of 1994, he received a lethal injection. A man who is known as the Milwaukee Monster or the Milwaukee Cannibal terrorized the streets of America from 1978 to 1991. Born to an unhappy household, Jeffrey Dahmer was described as a happy and cheerful child by his neighbors. But behind this bright facade was a troubled youth with an atrociously dark side. During puberty, Dahmer realized that he was gay, a fact he hid from his parents. All 17 of Dahmer's victims were males aged from late teens to mid-30s. Dahmer would lure men to his abode and sometimes engage in sexual acts before killing them. His murders have some of the most gruesome details as he described them during his conviction, as well as the recovery of several decapitated body parts from his apartment. Dahmer was arrested when the last man he brought to his apartment managed to escape and alert the police. Dahmer was an antisocial necrophile who had been diagnosed with several other mental disorders. However, he was ruled as sane and he himself pleaded guilty. He was ready to accept the death penalty, but was sentenced to a lifetime in prison because of Wisconsin laws. He would later be bludgeoned to death by his fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution. That's all for today. If you have any thoughts on today's video, you can always leave them in the comments section. Don't forget to leave a like and share it with your friends. You can also subscribe to the channel to get updates on new videos that might interest you. Until next time, have a great day.